Wagwan YouTube, it's your boy S2K here with Kuya Seb and AGI Racing. We're here to finally load up my S2K, get it sent to the shop, get ready for the F24c Stroker build. Get ready. About ready to start the teardown. Little backstory in case you don't know, I was just at Button Willow. Seems like the car threw a rod bearing or spun something. I've got no knocking, but after an oil change I had a ton of copper material in the oil. So, time to do a rebuild. What are we gonna do? 2.4 Inline Pro. Started getting all the Password JDM stuff out. Goal for today is gonna be to get the exhaust off, get the transmission out. Little by little, we're gonna pull this thing out, we're gonna pull it apart. We're gonna rebuild it. We're gonna be back, make some power. About 2.5 hours. Got the exhaust out, we got the headers out, and got the trans out. There she sits. There's all my goodies. We're about to call it for the night. Tomorrow, we're gonna be pulling the motor, putting it on a stand, and starting the tear down. We got some good company. You guys recognize Kuya Seb, Dustin's S2K, and certain Mr. Cody Walker's S2K as well. It's been a couple days. Decided to take a break and take things slow. It's progressing today. We're gonna get the motor out, get it on a stand, to get the tear down started. Got the harness out, got the trans, drive shaft, exhaust, all of that out. Today we're gonna drain the radiator, pull the clutch and flywheel, disconnect the fuel lines, pop her out. Motor's almost out. Watch the rest. All right, boys. Motor's out. Oh yeah. All right, so we've made a little bit of progress tearing down the motor. Today we're gonna get it all stripped down. So here we are, oil pan removed. This is still tight, but yeah, it's not supposed to do that. Sadly, all four of them do the same thing. The oil pan, as you can see, got ourselves a bunch of bearing material. So we're gonna tear it down and see what it actually looks like. A little tip I wanted to show you. So as you take apart the motor, there's gonna be a whole bunch of bolts you gotta keep track of. One of the hardest things about taking apart a motor is figuring out where all the stuff goes when you put it back together to make my life a little bit simpler. Number all the bolts. See, that one's number 15. Down here we got number 10. So by numbering all the bolts, should be a lot easier to keep track of where they go and put it back together. All right guys, motor's fully torn down. Damage isn't as bad as I thought. There's the cylinders. So cylinder 4 is the worst, actually. You can't really see it all that well right now, but you can see the scoring up here. This is the worst of it. The other cylinders were more or less pretty smooth, except for one big mark right here in cylinder 1. And here's the guts, all torn down. I think I got lucky because this one journal is a little burned. The rest of them look very, very good. I think overall this crank is definitely reusable, but not for me because we're going big boy. Finally, we are here. I know it's finally for me and not so much for you guys who are watching this. After a few months of accumulating parts, finally ready to build my F24. Here, we've got our block. Now I went with an FRM. I decided to keep the FRM lining. Didn't really want to go with the sleeves. Plus we're staying naturally aspirated, so no boost, and it should be good. We went over 0.5 millimeter, and she looks pretty in there. We've got our head, stage 1 that we sent off to Inline Pro. They took care of everything for me and sent it back along with the K24 crank, the Inline Pro rods, the Carrillo 87.5 millimeter FRM piston, and we are set. The rest of the motor all laid out right here. All new Honda OEM parts, new timing chains, new oil pump, new water pump. We are gonna get this girl ready to send. So a kind of crucial step in this whole process, you wanna make sure your motor is balanced. Now, what do I mean by balanced? You wanna make sure the rotating assembly is as close as possible, each cylinder, in terms of weight. That'll reduce vibration and allow your motor to run a little bit more healthy. So check this out. We've got this awesome scale brought to you by my dope ass fiance. And we are weighing currently our piston and our ring combo. Now normally you should be able to weigh these separately. We're weighing them together because I had the machine shop set the ring gap for me. In order to weigh the whole rotating assembly, you're gonna wanna weigh the pistons, the rings, the wrist pins, and the rods. And the way to then get it balanced, record all of those weights, and then play mix and match. You want to combine the right piston and ring combo with the right rod and wrist pin combo to make sure that everything is within at least a gram. Ideal is within about 1/10 of a gram, and you can make modifications to get it closer if you have to by removing material from the piston right here. These areas will not compromise the strength of the piston and will allow you to go ahead and get the weight down and get it balanced. I'm really hoping we don't have to remove everything. If everything's within about 5/10 of a gram, half a gram, I'm probably gonna leave it alone. But yeah, we'll get our weights and we'll see. So we did the work of balancing the motor. If you remember, we matched up the weights of all the individual components of the reciprocating assembly to make sure the balance was close. Now we're working on blueprinting the motor. So blueprinting the bottom end means that we have all of our bearing halves, our main bearings here, already assembled with our crankshaft and our girdle. They all have a small strip of plastic gauge. Now this is plastic gauge in case you've never seen it. It's just this little tiny strip of plastic. And the way it works, you take little strips of it and you place them across each one of the journals. Then put your girdle down and you torque it to spec. Make sure you torque it in the correct sequence and to the correct specifications. Once that's done, you'll remove everything again. That plastic gauge will have shrunk down. It will have squished and flattened. Then you take this area right here and you're going to compare the width of the plastic gauge to this scale right here. And this is what's going to tell you exactly what your clearance is. For example, if your plastic gauge has shrunk to this wide, you're going to be looking at 0.001 of an inch. Whereas if it's shrunk to only this wide, you have a bigger clearance of 0.003. Here with the S2000 motor, we're going for about 0.001, 0.0015. We'll see what we get. Hopefully one pass gets us done. If not, we're going to be playing mix and match. All right, we're all torqued down. Now we're gonna take it off and check our plastic gauge. Now that we've broken them all loose in the correct sequence, we can just zip them off. I am currently spreading the assembly lube, getting ready to drop this in. Make sure my thrust washer is in place. Checked all of our clearances, made sure everything is within a spec we're happy with. And now, the last thing left to do, drop the girdle in. Thrust washer's in. Got our girdle all Honda bonded and assembly lubed up. Ugly ass Honda bond job, but should do the job. So we're here, day 3 of the build. We're putting the pistons in. So as you can see, we've already got pistons 1 and 4 here in the block, and we're getting ready to drop in 2 and 3. I've got piston 2 here in my ring compressor, and we're gonna put her in. So first we're gonna take off the end cap here, set that down, get a little bit of assembly lube, spread it on our journal. Now, important, make sure your pistons are facing the correct way. There is an intake and exhaust side. As you can see here, our intake reliefs are bigger than our exhaust reliefs. This is going in like this. Make sure the bottom of the piston sits in nice. Get yourself a mallet and hopefully a helper. Tap it down gently. And she is. Now we're going to turn the motor over on its side, continue tapping the piston down into the bore while my helper lines up the rod to make sure that it doesn't chip our crank. Once we've got it seated against the crank, I'm going to get the rod end, bolt it, and torque it down. Now that we're seated, we're going to get a little bit more assembly lube, put it on our journal. Get it on there nice and even. Do the same on our rod end. So, Now what you're gonna make sure that your notches are on the same side. As you can see here, our bearing end has a notch here, and right here our rod has the notch on that side. So we're gonna make sure those notches are on the same side, and we're gonna put our end cap on there. You're gonna get your hardware, in this case ARP, so we're gonna use a little bit of the ARP fastener lube. Don't need a whole lot, just get the threads a little bit wet, and get them in there. Now, super important. I'm using a gun here only to snug this up. Don't ever actually tighten it with a gun. So as you can see, we're going really slow. Now we're going to turn the motor over. And I'm going to torque this in 2 steps. First to 25 foot-pounds, and then to 47. Now we'll go to our final torque spec of 47. And that's it, cylinder 2 is in. Now we can turn the motor back over and test and make sure everything moves smoothly. So you can see we've got 3 out of 4 cylinders in, working nicely. Now time to pop in number 3. All right guys, quick tip. Before you get your piston in your compressor, you're gonna wanna make sure you set your ring gap, first of all, which was done by the machine shop in my case, but also the positioning of your rings. You don't want all 3 ring gaps to be in the same spot, otherwise you're just gonna have a waterfall of oil going right through it. You're gonna burn everything and you're gonna have to tear your motor down again. Usually, there's gonna be a diagram somewhere. In this case, we're using the service manual to tell us exactly where the ring gap is. The service manual shows the wrist pin traveling across the piston like this, and then asks you to put ring number 1 offset just like that. Now ring number 2 is going to be offset 180 degrees over here. So 1 and 2 are offset 180 degrees from each other. Now ring 3 is the oil scraper ring, and you can see right here there's a little gap. Ring 3 is going to be offset, it's a sandwich. It's a top ring, a little oil scraper, and then a bottom ring. So you're going to set the top and bottom rings offset from each other, and they're going to be across like this. So top ring gap is here, bottom ring gap is there. Ultimately, you're setting 4 ring gaps, or you're placing them 4. So what we're doing is we're setting them across the piston like this, each one 180 degrees from each other, to ensure that the oil has the longest possible path to travel before it can escape the piston or get into the combustion chamber. So we are here, day 4 of the build. Hopefully we can make some real progress today. So you can see we've got our bottom end all assembled. We've got the oil pump in, the oil pump chain, and our sprockets in. Everything's lined up, and we've got our timing chain, guys. We are just about ready to flip the motor over and finish the final prep to get the head on. So first what we're gonna do is gonna zip tie all of this together to keep this nice and tight and tied out of the way to make sure we can get our head on with no problems. Head gasket's down. We're going to clean it up a bit and get ready to put the head in. All right guys, we're ready to drop the head on. We've got our timing chain cover on, everything bolted down nice. The crank pulley is loose for now, just in place to make sure we're at top dead center. Let's do it. All right guys, we've got our head on and we're ready to torque it down. Now, when you torque it down, it's really important and you follow the torque specifications, both of the head and of the bolts that you're using, the actual hardware. So for example, we're using ARP hardware. That means that we're using a stud with a nut on top. We're gonna have to torque these down in 3 steps, 30 pounds, 60 pounds, and then the final spec, 85 foot-pounds. And that's the hardware spec. We're gonna have to do that in the correct order specified by the manufacturer. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, we're gonna work in each step. So step 1, 30 pounds, 1 through 10. Step 2, 60 pounds, 1 through 10. Step 3, finally, 85 foot-pounds, 1 through 10. Then our head is torqued and we're ready to proceed to timing. All right, here we go. All right guys, we've got the top end together, we've got our cams in, we've got the motor timed. So I'm gonna give you guys a few tips if you decide to do this for yourself. First of all, the rocker assembly. It's a bitch. All of the rocker arms move. It's a real pain in the ass to get in here correctly. So 2 things I wanna show you that I learned today. First of all, the service manual tells you to install these 2 and these 2 bolts while the rocker assembly are still out. The reason for that is that the rod that runs through this whole assembly and holds the rockers in place has 2 slotted holes in it on each side, here and here, and also all through the middle, to make sure that the bolts can fall through. If you don't have the bolts through before, chances are that rod's not going to be correctly lined up, and like me, you're going to get it in, you're going to get the cams in, you're going to go to put the covers on, and shit, they don't fit. So you're going to have to take it all out. So before you put it in, make sure that you slide, or the front 2 rather, and the back 2 in, so that way you have the rods correctly aligned and all of your center bolts will go through. Over here, we have everything timed. Now, as you can see, our main timing sprocket, our timing marks are right here level with the head, and these 2 right here are facing each other. So another tip, when you put the cams in, they're gonna sit a little wonky because they're sitting on top of the rockers, which are sitting on top of the springs. A couple of the lobes contact the rocker, so they don't sit perfectly flush. The exhaust cam, this notch sits just like this, ever so slightly tilted down in towards the motor. Same with the intake cam. When you have them timed correctly, before you put the rocker covers on, they sit just a hair inside. Once you set the rocker covers on and you tighten them down, as you can see, they flatten out, they face each other, and everything's nice and level. Make sure you torque everything in the correct sequence. That way you don't damage the cams. And turn the motor over. Make sure you've got no interference. Make sure it turns over smooth. You should be good to go. Once you've got everything timed and in, it's time to test it. Make sure you got your crank pulley on, get a 19 mil, and go ahead and turn it over. Now you're gonna wanna turn it over really slow at first. You wanna feel for any type of resistance, any type of binding. There is gonna be some resistance, and you are gonna feel it very slightly because of the compression as the pistons move up and down in the bore. What you're looking for is anything hard, anything stiff, anything feels like you're pushing against something, you probably are. You gotta stop and go back and check your work. We have no strong resistance, nice smooth motor. You can watch all the valves open and close as the cam turns over. And I can turn this motor over by hand really easily. Also important, make sure you don't have spark plugs in, otherwise you're gonna have a much more difficult time telling what is resistance and what's compression. So leave the spark plugs out. At this point, you shouldn't be anywhere near that anyway. Make sure you're going clockwise, the direction of rotation. Turn it over a few times, get it all the way back to top dead center. Mark top dead center right here on your crank. And once you're there, you can come back and double check. And yep, my timing marks are still all aligned nicely. I did actually go just a little hair past top dead center, but all of my timing marks are aligned nicely. Motor is timed and we can go forward. So we finally got the motor all done, got the harness on, got our coolant lines in, we've got the chain on, and we are ready to go. I've got my homie Chico over here helping out, making sure nothing crazy goes down, make sure I don't rip my hands or legs or arms off or whatever. And yeah, we're gonna get it up on the engine hoist right here behind me, and we're gonna get it in the car. All right guys, another day done. Today was actually really productive. I didn't show it all because caught up in the work, trying to get shit done, and also because a lot of the stuff you can find on your own online. We got the motor in the car. We've got our coolant hoses all hooked up. We've got our wire harness in there, everything's set, ready to go. We've also got our transmission in the car. We've got the drive shaft, we've got the exhaust, and I even did the subframe collars today. Really productive day. So tomorrow, what I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna make sure everything underneath is torqued to spec. I'm gonna get the radiator in, I'm gonna start filling it with coolant and do the final prep that I need to get the thing started. Hopefully I can get a base tune in the next few days and we can fire her up and get it on camera. So we're here, everything's in, everything's set. I just got the flash uploaded, got a charger hooked up. We are going to go ahead and crank the motor over, no fuel pump fuse. Make sure we prime the oil pump, get oil everywhere in the motor, and we're gonna push the fuel pump fuse in there and send it. Let's go. Just got back from our first test drive. Everything's fucking copacetic. Can't believe it, we pulled it off. Motor feels great. Now we just gotta break it in, take it to the tuner, see what she does on the dyno. So last night we got the car home. Everything was good, everything felt nice. And now we're getting ready to take this beautiful thing out to work. Now, something I chose to do before I started the car, before I primed the oil pump, I did the clutch bypass to make sure that I don't have to put any pressure on the crank when I start the car. I thought that was especially important for the first startup, make sure there was nothing preventing the car from turning over freely. So now, there's my little 2.4. Oh yeah! We're here at Eric's Racing. Today is the day. Finally getting the tune in. Hopefully she makes good power. Hopefully it's safe. Let's see. Making some pop. Alright guys, we're getting the last few pulls. Here we go. What's going on, guys? Here we are a whole year later, and I'm finally filming an outro because I just couldn't let the video end like that. I'm not great at this. This is the first time I'm doing anything like this, and to be honest with you guys, I just felt a little bit awkward filming myself in Eric's shop, and I didn't get a whole lot of good footage. But to fill you in, we made 263 wheel horsepower, 199 wheel torque that day on his Dynapack. For comparison, he told me other tuned S2000s do about 230 to 240 horsepower and about 180 torque. So the torque and the horsepower was way up on what you could expect a regular bolt-on tuned S2000 to make, and it definitely showed. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that that motor that we built is not what's in here now. Lucky for you, I got a whole bunch of footage to fill you in on exactly what happened. And I finally got a good editor I'm working with, and we're gonna be able to produce some videos and show you guys what's going down. We got a new build coming, a new stroker. We're gonna make some more power. I'm excited. We've got some cams and some cool stuff going on. So if you're interested, if you like this video, stay tuned. We got other stuff coming. Yeah, thanks.